my gallery along with my husband Josh. This is David Humphrey and Jennifer Coates. And this is David Humphrey's show. It's been amazing working with him. I want to thank Annabelle Osberg there in the front row for introducing us to David Humphrey. He was her teacher at Yale. Anyways, so welcome to Serious Topics. What you have here, I was thinking it's almost like a shell, David Humphrey's work. Outside, we have his paintings on vinyl that wrap the space. And as you come inside, normally we have his video playing, which comes from upstairs over there onto the wall. He plays saxophone and bass, and he shoots music videos to go with the saxophone and bass, and they're amazing. They're of his transit. The video that we have that we've been projecting is called Transits. This show is called Transits. Transits is actually a word that describes astrology, but David doesn't believe in it. He's
but
a Virgo.
Works, right? You don't have to believe in it, but
Virgo.
It still works.
Yeah, maybe not. And so anyways, these are his incredible paintings, and they have something to do with when people merge with their surroundings and things that are happening around them and what really makes identity. And inside of the closet, we have a lot of artwork that we've shown by a lot of people, but we have a smattering of drawings by David Humphrey. So take a look at those. And okay, anyways, and then this is Jennifer Coates. She has a show up at Tyler Park Presents. That's in like West Adams area. Her show's amazing too, and it's all full of magic objects. She's also a painter, and these guys are amazing. You're in good hands with them, and I'm gonna pass the microphone over to you.
Cool. This is so cute. I hope I don't drop it or stab myself.
Is that a stirring stick that's holding
It's
the
really
microphone?
cute. Oh, nice. Is it okay to have it like this distance? Yeah. Okay. So, hi everybody. It's nice to have a little full room here. And I'm going to just start with my first question / observation. Having known you for quite some time now, I think it's almost 29 years that we've been an item. And so that means I've seen his work evolve and change close up for a very long time. And I'm just going to say that's my favorite painting, not to devalue the other ones. And sometimes other paintings feel bad about themselves when you compliment one too much, but that's the one that kind of always jumps out at me, and I wanted to start there. And what's the title of that one again?
After the Feast.
After the Feast. So I like to, when I go to David's studio, make up stories about what I think is happening in the work, and sometimes it involves like a kind of sly psychoanalytic diagnosis of him and his problems. So when I look at this one, I imagine after the feast, it's like the next day after a social gathering or a dinner party, and he's sort of processing everything alone in the studio, as we do. And I imagined these kind of biomorphic, cartoony presences as like what our brains do when we're remembering a person, and maybe what you said the wrong thing to them, or you had an awkward exchange, and you kind of mutate your memory of them like over time, and especially when you're depicting. And each shape to me is sort of like a different version of depiction styles. You've got the little dots, you've got a kind of more diagrammatic line happening, something looks a little more like a pink floating viscera. So to me, this is like a portrait of the artist in the studio, digesting strange social interactions. And I love paintings within the painting. So the open book, I look at that and I think, is that a David Humphrey centerfold? Or is maybe that a Philip Guston? And are you getting ready to eat your snack at the studio, or did you just finish it? Over to you.
Well, I love this idea. It's very suggestive to me. thinking about the difference between, let's say, the performative self, the self that is at the dinner interacting with other people, and then the reflective self later, remembering and maybe misremembering what you did and who you were, and that somehow that split is sort of, I feel like it's in a lot of these works, that that personhood is somehow an assemblage of like different parts, heterogeneous things, that what constitutes personhood is really very dispersed, and might even be nothing more than a kind of retrospective fiction, right? That like selfhood somehow emerges out of remembering who one thought one was. And I feel like that question gets to that issue. And I think somehow paintings can kind of crawl in there. I mean, part of it is that a painting always exists under the sign or under the coherence making of the signature, like the author effect or something like that. But that underneath it, you can start to get at, that wily, complicated, multiple, voiced self. Maybe that answers your question.
Yeah, no, this is good. I just, in some ways, I think the reason why we became artists in the first place was to sort of find a space away from all the complexity of humans that you can't control or understand. And it's like, okay, maybe I can sort of control what's happening on this painting surface or on the piece of paper. But have you ever felt like that, like so alienated from humanity that the studio becomes this place to process and meditate on?
My guess is you know the answer. Yes, of course, all the time. I feel like we as artists kind of find a way to optimize solitude. That this thing of solitude is such a kind of peculiar and vital place for us. I mean, in fact, it's very populated as far as it goes in our heads. And in that solitude, there's all all the cross currents of like history and other people, and we kind of navigate it and make something of it. Whatever it is, that sort of solitary sociability.
Maybe you could talk a little bit. Let's look at this one. I like to have the concrete image in front of us, but I'm looking at it and thinking about your tendency to sort of pit different styles or approaches of painterly mark making against each other and making these kind of quasi-readable, sometimes abstract constructions that are kind of, in this one, they look like they're befriending each other, or maybe meeting for the first time across that little strip of gray in the road. But maybe you could talk a little bit about that, your playfulness with different languages of mark making.
Sure. I mean, I like thinking of different kind of representational idioms, let's say, or styles as being possibly characters, that they could have a role and interact with each other. These different painterly languages can kind of interact the way characters interact, let's say in a novel or something. But this one, I feel like, is a kind of a couple painting. It's a sort of a portrait of a couple. The one on the left, kind of rocky, stony, a little chillier, but also like underwritten by a turbulence, all the kind of swirling marks. And then the one on the right, way hotter, a little bit more liquid, dynamic, and maybe accessorized with a kind of, a lamp post and electrical wire. It was inspired by a bush that I saw in Cornwall. And this bush was, very groomed, and out of it poked, this electrical material and a lamp. And I thought, oh, that's cool. They're like appendages. They're like ornaments somehow. And then there's also in Cornwall. I mean, I like making drawings while traveling. It's a different way of being in the world, and then drag those sketches back to the studio, and now they're sort of enveloped with memory and associations, and then you can use them. I mean, I guess it's like casting. I'm always looking for protagonists, and I find them all kinds of places, but part of my research is like thinking about locations, thinking about protagonists. And so in this case, this could be us. Jennifer Coates,
based
David
on
Humphrey.
your description, I couldn't help but think, I guess I'm the liquid yellow one with the weird instrument trying to make sense of you, and
Right.
you're chilly but unruly. True.
And I like that somehow in that I'm calling it a lamp, a street light, but that there's this kind of geometric abstraction inside there.
Yeah,
But
it's like I'm looking at you with this tool, this technology, but it's getting it wrong. It's really not seeing you better at all.
No.
Oh well. I like what you were saying about bringing the sketchbook with you everywhere and moving through the world with this kind of. I feel like when we're drawing or taking pictures, thinking about what we might do with them when we're back in the studio, we're both heightened to where we are and also kind of a little removed from it at the same time. Do you kind of want to talk about that a little?
Yeah, I mean, that's funny. I like that. I guess I'm kind of reeling it back to kind of maybe an origin story. Like I remember being in high school and taking acid. And like acid somehow had this capacity to sort of turn the sensorium into something like a dream, or maybe it kind of entangles perception with consciousness in a way that I think is analogous to what you're describing about moving through the world as an artist, in which, everything that you see is potentially part of a lived, vital awareness, consciousness. And so if one could make a painting that could kind of capture that, then that would be a certain kind of aspiration, and maybe have a vitality, and maybe make a contribution to the ever unfinished project of describing what it is like to be alive right now.
Well, this makes me want to talk about your videos, which I'm sort of sorry we don't have the soundtrack going, but you wouldn't be able to hear us talk if it was on. So your habit of moving through the world from our home in Long Island City in Queens to your studio, and you're always busting out the phone to take video footage. And that's just a pure case kind of like what it's like to move through the world. We watch you scanning around you, and you kind of mash things up together in the editing software and put a soundtrack to it. And we were saying on the way over here that maybe there was something like it's like documenting a world before it disappears.
Yeah, I mean, I love this virtue of the iPhone. Let's say, turn this into a commercial, but that somehow in your pocket you have this capacity to record things that are passing in front of you. And so this idea of transit is kind of a name for like this process of going from here to there and registering it and capturing it. And maybe for me, like this process can inflect music. So like I make multi-track recordings, and somehow like using the kind of the rhythm or the timing of it to kind of correlate to video clips that can kind of synchronize with it. So you get somehow like a version of what it's like to move through the world. But also transit, I like the idea that like the transit between states, states of being, as in, maybe some of these, or this one, let's say, in between being a diagrammatic body to being a more represented one, has a kind of character that maybe rhymes with, the idea of moving through the world. And like what is the part that stays the same as one transits or transitions? I like to say transition too. Anyway.
Yeah, transit's you did good with that title. It's nicely open. I'm looking at this painting behind everybody there of the two kind of abstraction figures holding up, somebody, maybe they've fallen, and you had some drawings of this kind of motif in your last show in New York, and I remember thinking it was like painting holding up sculpture, because you make sculpture as well as painting, and sometimes I can see a narrative around 2D and 3D, revealing itself in the paintings.
That's cool. The painting has kind of moved like so far away from its kind of source image, which was, and I was saying this to somebody earlier, a Goya painting called The Wounded Mason. And so in that painting, there's this unconscious person being carried by two people. And I kind of like the idea that they become a new sort of organism of cooperation. I'm kind of always looking for ways to sort of maybe think about groups and how groups can kind of hang together, or or not. And so in the kind of process of sort of improvising over it and riffing on it, they kind of like the three of them, or the one kind of composite animal broke down even further. And it's somebody looking at that painting and they were saying, "Oh yeah, it's a head. It's just one head." And I thought, well, that's kind of cool, like that there's somehow at least a quality of agency inside the picture. And maybe, this is something that I kind of like to get at sometimes, is, that the picture, the painting has the capacity to kind of look back, maybe, or that there's a kind of a living, sociable presence that a painting has that solicits a relationship with viewers. So, like if it's like a person, it's kind of wanting some kind of sociability in the form of like looking at it and interpreting it, and maybe maybe it wants to be friends, maybe it wants to kind of make a problem for you, or I don't know, maybe it wants to ignore you.
I liked what you were saying about the casting. I mean, that's been true of the way you think of images, figures in your work since the whole time I've known you. And if you're casting and you're always looking, for things that are going to make the cut, like, can you maybe give an example of what? Because we talk at the end of the day. Sometimes David will show me on his phone, all right, which one would you green light? Like, here, I want to make a painting that's 4 by 5 feet, or a large painting. Which one would you pick? And so there's this process of which image makes the cut to be a drawing, and then which one makes the cut to be a larger piece. And maybe you could explain that a little more.
I mean, a lot of it is just sheer economy of time. Like, we've got let's say a lot of works on paper, a lot of sketches that could be developed, and ideally I'd like to develop all of them. And in fact, not just develop all of them, but even develop images that, let's say, let's say I'd green light one, and it develops, and then at a certain point, like, I could go this way or I could go that way, and I go that way, and then there's another point, I could go this way or that way, and each one of those moments is kind of improvisatory, but in the end, you've got something which is not really improvised, but it's underwritten by this kind of bush of like a decision tree or something. So what would it be like to go back and rethink about one of those branching moments and think, well, let's go left now. Let's just try, and what would it look like then? So I don't know if this gets into an answer, but yeah, I mean, ideally, of course, you could have them all going and have 30 assistants starting them up, and then you just kind of like manically go through them and maybe take some drugs or something. Meanwhile, I have a healthy single person's, I mean, I am a one.
You do not have a staff of 30 people.
I don't have a staff of 30 people. I just do it all myself. So maybe that's good. You have to prioritize and really kind of like say, look, this is what matters. And it means that every painting is different, as you can see.
But it also means that you have more than enough reasons to get back in the studio the next day.
Absolutely.
No shortage of things to do.
Building is strong, and she's heard me invoke this notion of like a studio ecology, that the studio ecology means there's things in development, nutrients coming in, waste going out, and the thing, kind of is growing and is alive, maybe.
And there's always something to do. like whatever self you bring to the studio that day. You've got, if you want to sit with your crayons and color in the corner, you've got something to do for that self. If you're feeling kind of unruly and spazzy and you just want to make big marks,
Absolutely.
splash.
Yeah. Like, yeah, that's huge. Like, if one is completely uninspired and lazy, you can kind of do one thing, or if you're feeling like you just want to like listen to a book and do some like rendering, some kind of wonky, wrist only activity on a tabletop, well, there's that. And then you kind of wake up and realize, oh man, I need to do some more muscular working out. So, in a way, maybe every painting is underwritten by a question, like, what if? What would it be like to do something like that? What would it be like? And I'm not going to make this quote accurate. There's a guy, Timothy Morton, kind of an amazing writer. He's what is he? A speculative realist, romantic poetry scholar. And he talks about this thing, romantic irony, which is kind of interesting. If he wants to say that romanticism has this element of romantic irony. What is romantic irony is like, I see myself seeing. It's just kind of a self-conscious move. And he wants to say that it correlates to this moment in retail capitalism in which there is the plate glass. Plate glass emerges around the time of Romanticism. And the products in the window ask the passerby, or the passerby would ask the question, what would it be like to be a person who's wearing those pants? Anyway, that's a long way of saying.
That's what your work is about.
That's what my work's about. What would it be like to be a person who makes big gestures in the painting? Right.
What would it be like to be the person that makes a strange sort of quasi-scientific diagram in front of it always reminds me that building of a Holiday Inn that I stayed in as a kid in Syracuse, but I know that's not what it is. What is that building again?
It's another hotel somewhere, and it was kind of a ruin of a hotel, and I really liked it as a kind of an image of modernity and kind of like the machine imaginary. And I was reading at that time Siddhartha Mukherjee's book called Song of the Cell, which is kind of a great book. Everyone should read it. Like, what is a cell? I mean, the cell is kind of the basic unit of all living things. And, it started to talk about amino acids and proteins. And I realized, whoa, what the fuck is a protein? I think I know. I sort of remember. And then, sort of go online and look at these diagrams, and they look like these kind of weird, modern art toys, like molecules as they kind of hang together. And I thought, oh, it would be interesting to kind of bring that diagram of the unseen world that underwrites, our very, aliveness, and flush it into the world of, hotels and people and graffiti.
Corporate office. It's reminding me that, I think I'm getting this right, I don't think I'm making this up, but the word cell has something to do with the cells within monasteries, where the monks would have their rooms for solitary contemplation. And so it's making me think about the rooms in the hotel or the office building and the kind of isolation of that.
Right, that's a cool riff. I mean, I didn't play with this, and I'm thinking of maybe the painting itself, the bounded, four-squared character of the canvas as a kind of a cell within, kind of, the weird organism of us, the social.
The place where it's okay to make a mess.
Right. And then maybe even, like, I mean, this is another version of, personhood, like the idea of that, the sort of autonomous, bounded character of a body is sort of an illusion, kind of a fiction, when one thinks of, the microbiome and, and breath, the bringing in of air, the sort of character of language as it's sort of hybridized out of memory, history, usage, that there's all these features that sort of natter at and sort of vex the idea of the bounded, coherent self.
I can see that. There's a little painting over there of a woman walking, and her brain, her head is sort of fizzing out in red and yellow vapors, and she's got these floating stones all around her. And it's as you're talking, describing, what personhood is. Here we've got these. There's almost like glyph-like marks in the stones, and she's a vaporized, pulverized self moving through the world. She seems pretty sure of where she's going, though.
She's in transit. She's going from there to here.
Zing!
And I kind of like that maybe, the original idea, and I think I need to make some more paintings in order to get this idea a little more vividly, that somehow she's walking across this plaza. She's in the plaza now, but she was somewhere else. And she's kind of dragging fragments of that other place she was before with her. And they're kind of floating in the air as, and eventually might, kind of disappear. But it's like a glitch moment, where features of an elsewhere. And I kind of also I like that you mentioned this kind of glyph feature to what's in the rocks.
I knew you would like that.
I like that somehow that is possible with sort of reductive depiction schema, the kind of lines and marks one uses to make a representation, that as you kind of simplify them, they move in the direction of like language or like glyph marks or letters, something like that. And it kind of suggests this like more mystical, maybe medieval idea that somehow the sensorium is a form of writing of whatever deity or some spooky thing, but maybe a kind of a writing that's reflective of mind, something like that. That one of the things about mind is that it kind of makes sense of, it makes coherent the sort of noisy plenitude of perception.
That was good.
Oh yeah.
I like
Did that make sense?
Yeah.
I had no idea where that sentence was going when I started it.
I was totally with you. So there's another little painting over there with a sort of a hybrid twosome on top of a strange pinkish red column. And I know you were talking about that coming from a Helen Frankenthaler drawing, which seems like you look at that and that is not who you would think of.
Right.
So do you feel bad about that?
Now I do. I didn't.
Okay.
Yeah, I was at an art fair and there was this like cool Helen Frankenthaler drawing, and I took a snapshot of it, and it was basically like a bunch of blobs kind of hanging together, and it had this kind of weird energy, and it sort of just made sense, hung together in a certain way, and I just thought, oh, that would be an interesting sort of collaboration. I'm going to augment, semiutize / vandalize this Frankenthaler, whose work I love, especially that 50s, 60s moment.
Maybe this would be a good time to talk about collaborating with others and what that's been like when you bring it back to the studio, but also your idea about collaborating with earlier versions of yourself in your own work.
It gives me the tingles to be
quoted back to yourself by your wife.
Yeah, exactly. To me, this is a methodologically foundational for me. Like the idea that one could kind of exercise oneself in different voices, different characters within a picture as a form of collaboration. And so, these either split off parts of oneself, or often I'll have like old proofs from prints from years and years ago that I'll pull out and then kind of just interact with, collaborate. I was talking to somebody earlier here about Exquisite Corpse. Well, that's a little more of a kind of formalized, kind of stratified idea of kind of collaboration, blind collaboration. And so I like versions of that, working with tracing and then putting that tracing on top of something and then making a drawing of that, and just trying to find ways to generate new things, to make something you've never seen.
I'm thinking about we've collaborated on drawings and paintings over the years, and maybe it was 20 something years ago. We were sitting around in your studio with some friends, and all I was not making figurative work at all at the time, and all I wanted to do was make you laugh, like whatever I put in the drawing to make you laugh. And you used to tell me, you're a figurative artist, and I would be like, I am not. I would never. But it was because of collaborating and kind of lodging that experience in my mind that I was able to get back to it eventually.
That was cool. You were a genius. You cracked me up every time. I mean, of course, it was always some kind of rude sexual, turn.
Something about barf or poop, usually. I think.
Well, we're always trying to metaphorize the gooiness of paint and
Yeah.
somehow.
Yeah. Did you ever have a moment where you were collaborating with someone and you were like, oh, cool, I'm going to bring this back to the studio. I'm going to use this in my own work.
Have I done that? Maybe. I'm not sure, actually. That's funny.
Take a moment.
Yeah, you've stumped me. How about this? No, I never have.
Well then, moving on. How about this?
Okay.
No.
Okay, but I do love the idea of bringing others in. Yes, I have actually. Like I'll find a drawing at a yard sale. There was once a drawing somebody had made of like a young girl in a nurse's cap with a puppy with a bandage around its paw, and it was a guy, Frank somebody or other, and I'm like, whoa, this is kind of creepy and interesting and weird. And I ended up just like doing a drawing of his drawing and starting the painting from that. So I kind of, springboarded, I don't know what the word is. I sprang off of his thing, and it was a way to kind of bring somebody else into the work, and then having that the work would kind of emerge out of a relationship with that other. So yeah, I do that plenty. Do I have it here? No, not so much.
Yeah.
I mean, but like a pair of sneakers. I mean, I think I was on the subway and I saw some like really cool, weird sneakers that were kind of singing a song to me, and I took a snapshot of them, and then thought about how to bring them in. I could I could put them on a character in a painting, but maybe I could paint them as though they were on a sort of like a Mexican, retail bodega selling shoes, like on a wall, like a super simple, advertising image, a hand painted one. I kind of love hand painted representations of products, and so that that's a little bit of a collaboration, maybe.
Do you think now's a good moment to open it up and see if anybody?
I was about to make that move. You beat me to it. Well done.
Any questions for?
Can you talk about the brown spot on that face?
Oh yeah, that's
Great question.
I mean, I like the non sequitur a little bit sometimes, but I also like the idea of the thought bubble. I'm trying to find ways, I think a painting is a kind of a thought bubble already, but that, that there's something exteriorized from the subject, from the protagonist. And that one, is a kind of weird sort of shit brown with a scribble on it. And so it's like proto-writing, kind of a thought, a little bit excremental, and that represents a color that's a little more kind of organic than anything else in the picture, even though you've got a painting of a person. And so that's kind of loosely how I was thinking about it.
That's a depressive color then.
Like a what?
A depressive color.
Depressive. Could be. I mean, that's up to you.
I have a question. I don't know how to phrase. That's maybe about like youthfulness. To me, your paintings have always felt very young, and I feel like you also don't seem to age. I don't.
That's supposedly a nice thing to say.
Yes, yes. It's a compliment. But I feel like there's something about youthfulness and that may be related to your drawings feel. Sorry, paintings feel friendly. Um, and I don't know how to pose the question, but I feel like there's a voice that's like youthful and friendly and open.
Well, I hope so. I
yeah.
mean, this is what I was saying about the sociability of the work. I guess I like them to be playful, like, hey, let's play, and that maybe that play can resonate into something weird and dark and something, something that's maybe different from the manifest affect of the picture. I mean, I feel like these have a kind of buoyance, let's have a, like their vibe is sort of, friendly. But then in terms of like the youth thing, I do occasionally have this feeling like if I'm with people who have like right proper jobs, like working corporations or lawyers or something, hanging around, I feel like I should be at the kids' table. I'm like, I'm not really one of you guys. I'm sort of, I can't adapt to it. And then I go and then I pass by a mirror and like, oh, what the fuck? I'm 70, whatever.
Are you really 70?
See?
Yes, that would be yes.
It's reminding me of that. I hope it's okay to bring this up. That review that was written about your work like 18, 20 years ago. Thanks. And it was this obnoxious reviewer wrote something that I think is the greatest compliment. And it said like, your work is like a granny breakdancing. I was like, yes.
Yeah, it was like it was
Thank you.
It was embarrassing.
You were like 50 though.
Yeah.
So I mean, the whole age thing really starts to get screwed up. Like, what does it even mean?
It was weird because I was reading this thing and it was kind of like I couldn't really quite recognize myself in his writing, and at the end I kind of it sort of cracked up like, whoa, that's weird and funny. Mm-hmm. And then later on, like, hey, wait, that was a really negative review. He was really trying to hurt me, that guy.
But actually,
Mario Navis, his name, of course, I remember.
I think the word that I like to think like optimism was the word like defiantly optimistic is kind of like the palette and the look of your paintings, which I think is kind of interesting, especially the way you talk about them, which is so like heavy and heady kind of reminds me of like the way that Jim Carrey is now and the way that he talks about everything being like this kind of like amorphous blob of mystic whatever, and he's like a comedian that's like
that's funny.
Sonic the Hedgehog, whatever.
I mean, I like to think, and maybe I'll take a page from Nietzsche. Okay, so like, what is the irreducible value of an artwork? It's that it exercises vitality. That this thing of vitality, like to somehow be alive, or sort of what's the word, render, or kind of purvey the sense of aliveness is the first virtue, and then all the kind of semiotics and all the kind of theoretical material is interesting only insofar as it kind of can purvey that. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Sort of, kind of. But I was saying to somebody yesterday about reading an artwork as having maybe an argument with itself, or being, it's not exactly dialectical. Sometimes it is. And I was thinking about certain kinds of music, let's say, like hardcore music that manifestly seems filled with rage. And yet the kind of energy of it is like kind of joyous. And like, what is that? This kind of disconnect, or, there's certain kind of hip hop, it's like threatening and dangerous, but actually has this sort of like buoyant spirit. And I kind of am interested in that kind of thing. And I think you're getting at something similar.
I have some painting questions, like about craft. I I know that you start out with drawings, and do you make the drawings for the paintings more than once?
Well, so every painting is kind of different, and almost always though, there's a kind of a cloud, a range of things that kind of slowly coalesce closer and closer to something that looks like it could be a painting, which then is the thing I jump off of. And sometimes it'll be a very straight kind of transcription of the drawing, but sometimes it'll just be some element in it, and then I'll, make it up as I go along. And almost always there'll be some change along the way. I mean, sometimes I'll use a projector and I'll project a drawing, which is a kind of a cool way of distancing my own hand from itself. Or if I want some kind of photographic vibe or technological vibe in the thing, like in that hotel there, that has that kind of screen print, low res, kind of stencil feeling that I kind of wanted to keep. That would sort of rub against, the diagrammatic parts of the, the molecules. And so, if a process has been rehearsed enough times, I will want to fracture that. I want to break it and do something else.
Okay. I was wondering about like paint application and different kinds of brushes that you will use to get these drawings onto the paintings and then make them into paintings. Was it Francis Bacon who would he'd throw a painting away if it had too much paint on it, or if he changed it too many times. So um, I think I can see some areas where you would paint over something that's underneath and even allow some color to come into it. But a lot of them are, and there is complicated color in them. I know they're acrylic. Maybe you could mention when you started painting in acrylic and if you painting in other things. But I think about things like the gray, large swiping brush mark that's under the figure form rock mass that might be you that's about to be caught with the butterfly net, and the way that that brush arc was made, and the kind of beautiful way that the paintbrush scumbled against the canvas above the edge. And I was wondering, how do you make that line? What medium do you use? Is there anything that makes transparency in that gray? Is it more than one gray? What kind of special brushes do that kind of scumbling mark?
Super cool, wonky painting question.
That would be me.
Yeah, I mean, I basically switched out of oil paint somewhere in the early zeros, and part of the reason was I just wanted to kind of step away from all that history and all that craft, and to get closer to something like house painting, which I'd been a house painter, and I kind of always loved like this thing. You just dip the brush in, put it on. That's all you got. And so, and thanks to Jennifer Coates here, she discovered, shared with me, golden fluid acrylics. So it is kind of like house paint in a tube, and like you put it on, it kind of looks good already. And it's acrylic, so it dries fast. So let's say these two marked areas, it's kind of a performance. I have to kind of set it up. I do like a wet under thing, under zone.
What is that?
And that's just the paint, more paint. I just mix it up. It'll be light. Like on the right-hand side, it's just the yellow. I just make that yellow.
Oh, you
shape.
start with yellow and it's wet. And do you use any acrylic retarders in that or anything?
I do not, and I probably should if I really were smart. But instead, I put the music on really loud. Maybe I take a hit of weed. Put the yellow on, the green's ready to go, and like I have pretty much 45 seconds to execute it. Kaboom. I'll do the one on the right, one on the left, and then it dries and sits around, and then takes a couple months to kind of make sure it's right. In this case, I did the kind of the darker gray rocky bits over the marks. The one on the left was simpler, just kind of a couple little, bits. But weirdly, it was the part underneath the road. What are they sitting on? Are they sitting on it? Are they floating? That was the part that just took me forever to do and redo. Finally, the last thing was that kind of road down the middle was a way to sort of bring some of the background in. The road comes over, it's a little bit lighter.
And give it space.
Gave it space.
So the blue, did you do that first?
The blue background?
Yeah.
Yes, I did. As a matter of fact, now that I'm
And did you say you added any medium to the gray to make it thinner, or was it kind of a transparent gray?
pretty straight up. And in fact, I'm looking at it now thinking, it could have been like, what would it be if it was all equally really dark black? It'd be like a graphic overlay. Maybe that, to me, would be too much like classic academic postmodernism. Ooh, this layer on top of that layer. I kind of want it to be a little more, softer, maybe.
I think it's perfect.
Thank you. That's what I hope.
Thank you. Next.
A question of clarification on I wanted a clarification on what you meant by when you said that you would take, like with the yellow and the green, a couple of months to make sure it's right. What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, I guess, in some ways I call it curing. Like, I cannot decide whether a painting is finished properly, because that painting never existed before. What's the criteria by which you determine whether it's good enough, maybe, or great? I have to make at least 2 more paintings after it to then see it in the context of this new work. There's that. But then there's also just is that little electrical wire and the two little blocks, is that the right place for it? So I might draw that in with a water soluble Caran d'Ache, and then no, that's not right. And I'll kind of wipe it off, put it in another place. So there's a sort of I can play with it, test it out, and then live with it for a while, and then finally one day, that's it. Boom, let's just nail it.
During that time, do you usually look at the painting? Like how often would you look at it, or would you just put it aside and then not even look at it?
Oh no, it's out. It's out in the mosh amongst other works, and it's kind of trying to kind of establish its life and presence amongst the others, and so I'm always kind of catching it out of the corner of my eye, try to sneak up on it, and you're not done. Or I'll kind of walk in and out of the corner of my eye, like, something's wrong. Is it wrong? And then I look at it, no, there's nothing wrong, it's great. And then the next day I'll come in, something's wrong. No. And then you talk yourself into why it's great. Everything that was wrong with it turns out to be maybe great until you realize it's not great. And you got to fix it. This is like a cuckoo land, what we're doing.
Yeah. It totally is.
So I'm not that familiar with your work, but I'm very excited to see it, and it's really cool, and I really enjoyed your speaking. But I'm sensing that there's an interest in the idea of the shape of yourself, of the self, the limits of the self, and what comes out of the self, and understanding consciousness and things like that. And so I'm definitely seeing it in the work, but I also, when I think about that, and I get asked this question myself, so I'm asking you because I need somebody to tell me what they think.
I'll help you with your answer.
Okay.
Next time
So I can see that visually, I don't necessarily think surrealism when I look at your work at all. But these are questions, obviously, that people who are surrealists sort of they almost trademarked it in some level, and which is sort of annoying. But I would love to know how you think about yourself as separate from that. How do you kind of distinguish yourself from that
Right.
specific label,
Sure.
which I also
I've been
get that you don't know
by
you to
it.
be that way.
I've been kind of pestered by it my whole career. And of course, surrealism, I feel like my foundations, are in Cubism, Cezanne, Matisse, into like de Kooning, and so surrealism is there the whole time, and I guess maybe and I loved Freud when I was a young artist, and I kind of thought that in a weird way Freud's outline of how the unconscious worked sort of harmonized with what happens in Cubism more than it did in actually surrealism. Yes, there's all the kind of psychosexual content in there, and all that's very interesting. And this is part of our language that we inherit. But there was something about surrealism which seemed kind of like self-consciously trying to kind of provoke or be weird, and that to me undermines its weirdness. Like if you're trying that hard, and you have a kind of rhetorical design on my being freaked out by your weirdness, then I refuse it.
Right. It becomes like a cliche of the weird unconscious thing. Whereas yours is like it's more like Cubism. Okay, can I just say one thing in response to what you're saying? I see that it's more like Cubism because Cubism was like trying to explain the world that we couldn't understand and the way the world actually was as opposed to how we experience it.
Right.
And you're also trying to like deal with what is the residue of space as we move from one place to another. So I can see that. That makes sense.
Yeah, or like to break down your pictorial language into its constituent parts, and then think about different ways of putting them together, according to what principles.
Right.
Sexual ones, social ones, political ones. Whatever your makes you happy.
Yeah, thank you. That was like way more confident than I could ever be. So thank you.
Thank you.
I was curious about the newspaper in this painting. Is that supposed to be the Wall Street Journal, or?
Indeed, it is.
It is. So, are you referencing an idea of topicality, or because it's not clear what's in the newspaper, or what the subject might be?
No, that's purposely left ambiguous.
Right.
And I guess I was thinking partially of like one's morning ritual and the role of news in a kind of in the fabric of a day or something, and then on top of the newspaper is sort of an iPhone, and so I kind of maybe wanted to rub those two, or to have them sit there, to be adjacent. I guess I like the kind of this idea of the topical, but not too topical. I don't know. I mean, these are such intuitive ratios you want to establish. I kind of want to put it into like a lived life of like right now, but then I don't want it to be kind of exhausted by that.
Well, if it's too specific, then if it's too specific and topical, it probably won't be topical for very long. So you probably want to be.
But it could have a timestamp, and that could be cool. I mean, right now I'm thinking, hey, I should do something with an absolutely topical, like feature, like on this day, at this hour. I mean, I have done paintings that have kind of like fake timestamps on them. When if you make a painting of a timestamp, like that sort of is absurd. It kind of breaks away, and yet it's kind of saying this is at 3:49 on October 3rd. That could have a strangeness.
Documentation. Some photographers do that.
Yeah.
Where they say, label the date and time and place. It's like this is the documentation of that moment.
Right, and some people actually Photoshop that in to their photographs. I mean, now you've got all these tools, and you can kind of totally lie about that.
Thank you.
I'm curious about the text and numbers in that painting, like the screen with the text and numbers.
So we had been to Greece recently, and I kind of liked seeing like signs that I couldn't quite understand out there in the world. But I thought of it as like maybe being at a coffee shop where these are the prices for the various drinks you could have. So this idea of like the signage, the elements to the right that have sort of drifted off of the wall. But it's like the macchiato, the latte. I mean, they're all kind of in the prices of, some fancy drink. Not at the higher end, so at the very bottom. But then, and then the OAAXEKO, whatever that is. That's just like mysterioso, cryptic. It's the last letter of the product that you would buy for the amount to the right of it. So what would they be? Macchiato would be the top one, maybe. I don't know. But I guess I like the idea that it makes a space for projection. Like you can, you kind of trip on it. Like what? What is that? What are those letters? And that hopefully that's not an off-putting ambiguity, but a kind of like a teasing, a kind of solicitous ambiguity.
That painting to me looked like a late middle age painting. It's like you look at the Wall Street Journal, you've got your phone, you've got charts of numbers, you have this thing in the middle that looks like something because your tummy hurts. It's like a hot water bottle, and then like there's like a aperitif, like maybe with bitters because you have digestive issues, and then you've got your like walking shoes because you are taking care of yourself. You're going for your walk in the morning.
Kristen, that is a fine. That's a testimonial. I like it.
Nice forensic work.
And then what about the cleanser? I thought you were going to kind of come up with like what needs to be cleaned up.
What is the cleanser?
The green.
The soap bottle.
Oh, that looks to me to be a hot water bottle that you would put on your stomach when you can't because your tummy's upset.
Oh, okay, yeah, well.
So it just was totally responsible, no frills, kind of late middle age, responsible.
Thank you, darling.
And it's called Good Prices. So that's, that's somebody who is, practical and responsible and sensible. Yes.
Right. So maybe so for me to be sensible is aspirational.
I think so, maybe.
What would it be like to be a
sensible
person?
Yeah, exactly. Well, you guys are so got another question?
Oh, sure. I mean,
here.
No.
I know Josh had some questions too. I don't know what happened to him.
Just when you were talking about the branching, the bush, the like
decision tree.
Yeah, it just made me think of the digital, and I was wondering about your relationship to that. Just in that you can have every iteration, you can and then you can now mythologically at least have AI work out all those possible things to their endpoints, but just in terms of, I mean, besides the fact that it seems that would be discarding all of your practice to and how you work, what kind of relationship you might have with digital.
Yeah, I'm totally. I'm swimming in the waters of the digital, like all of us are, and I. On the one hand, painting is such a kind of form of resistance. It's so emphatically material. It's so kind of tactile. It's so kind of unchanging once you've finished. And so in that respect, it's a kind of it's a response to the digital. I feel like to make a painting today is always already to be in response to the digital. But also at the same time, I feel like it's been very helpful and productive, and and like Photoshop to me has changed how I think about constructing an image, even how I think about color, like RGB as a sort of a different way of parsing, what counts as a color as opposed to the color wheel or something like that. So yeah, I mean, sometimes I will occasionally sort of more directly address or thematize the digital into the paintings, and other times I just let the chips fall and see what emerges, but it's never not there.
So there's the sense of that is the world that we're in. So you're responding to the world. So
absolutely,
it's in your work, but in terms of actually producing in that medium, and that's where it's so clearly different than painting, and it's so like the material form of paint and the whole like the way you're describing your processes and the way that you think and work and express, like it just feels foreign to that. I
guess maybe it is. I mean, it's haunted by it maybe.
As a tool itself.
Yeah. I mean, I make, when I'm making music, it is, the great revolution of recording and the digital. It's fantastic. So whatever, I'm a beneficiary and a victim of this new kind of regime of the digital. I have not crossed over into AI. I feel like I feel like I embody it in some ways, but that I make these paintings with a kind of AI-ish character, but I'm not in the business of scraping other people's data. But I like having other people in it. I mean, I believe in that. That's part of like the living language of images.
David, I was wondering, being around these paintings for like a week or so and longer, but I was feeling a kind of poppy noirness, like
Poppy noir.
noir, like in the sense that there's enough imagery in all of them to, they're sort of slicing and dicing against each other, but there's also like captured angles, like the good prices. There's just enough of a lone diner situation going on there, and even some of the faces, the way they, it's not black and white, but there's just enough there to like hang on to. So it's like you're fragmenting some of the imagery, but there's also this undercurrent of maybe it's the city, maybe there's something else. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, I mean, that's nice. Thank you. And in fact, it makes me want to go back and really fulfill that.
Okay.
I want to make that. I want to prove you right.
Okay.
Because it rubs against a little bit this idea of like the buoyance, the youthfulness thing.
Mm-hmm.
But like to me, like what you're saying about noir relates to maybe like solitude, existential kind of malaise, sort of alienation in kind of urban settings, and I care about those things, and I think we're not listening to it, but the music in Transit, I feel like sometimes has a kind of no wave noirishness to it, especially the lonely sax,
right,
and it's kind of angled character. I feel like has been used in movies,
right,
and I love that.
That's cool. Thank you.
Valerie,
here you go.
Oh, I just wanted to ask about the painting of the woman that hasn't been talked about yet.
So you said to say something. You want me to say something about it?
I don't know, just the figure and the little things around.
I mean, that's a weird painting. I mean, and
the little dog. Yeah, it's just.
I mean, that was a painting that, just in terms of the process, that large face in the middle showed up a year after I finished. I thought the painting was finished, minus that. And it was one of those ones that it just like, is it enough? Is it enough? Maybe it's not enough. But basically I started out like this brown shape and then, became personified. And I was thinking about like things one owns or maybe attributes, there's the car, furniture, pet, other homes, workplace, that they would be kind of stuck to like the body. Instead of having limbs, you have these, your possessions or something like that. I think that was a kind of, to me, a promising way to make an image. And so that kind of evolved up till that point. And then finally, like that brown figure just didn't command the role I was asking her to command. And so I had to call in a sub.
Not doing your job.
Yeah, you're not doing your job. I couldn't get her to do her job. But yeah, I mean, in terms of like this idea of the thought bubble, it also then becomes like, let's call it the hair, the brown shape on the left-hand side of the red figure kind of links over to this other one. So it becomes, like a relationship, two people, or maybe it's really one person with, with a kind of another character or remembered earlier self folded into the picture.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, thanks.
Well, you guys are so attentive. I can't believe it. It's really lovely having all these people looking at my pictures.
Any last questions?
Is there any more questions? Yeah,
well,
that's good.
Thank you, David and Jennifer, so much.
Let's eat some cookies.
We're going to put the video on so people can get a little more information and sounds, and please stick around or be on your way, or I'll fold up some chairs and da da da.
Wow.